Hey, deserving listeners. Today, I want to answer the question, is Elon Musk a Nazi? So the first question I have is a meta question on this question is, why do we care about this question? Is Elon Musk a Nazi?
If it weren't for the fact that he is a CEO of a major company, or a CEO of many major companies, or a CEO of the companies that are some of the biggest contractors for the U.S. government, or actually the biggest contractors for the U.S. government, and that he owns one of the most influential social networks on the planet, and that he's going to have an office in the West Wing, and that he funded the campaign. If it weren't for any of that, I guess it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, the short answer is he has power. The other question is, how do we answer this question? A lot of people are asking and answering this question, is Elon Musk a Nazi or a neo-Nazi? And I think it's important. In my field anyway, we have all these fancy words and practices regarding how do we know what we know, right?
Yeah.
So how do we answer the question, is Elon Musk a Nazi? How do you think we could answer that question?
I guess first we'd have to get on the same page about what we mean by being a Nazi is, what the meaning of the word is.
Okay,
Senator.
so define away.
We did a deep dive, but basically I'm going to keep it.
Yeah, it's funny. We did a deep dive both on Elon Musk and neo-Nazis.
Right.
Each, I think, had 12 to 15 chapters.
Yeah.
And took me, at the very least, like 3 to 6 months each of research. And we didn't choose those topics. Those topics were chosen by the patrons.
Yeah.
The patrons had like 50 things to choose from.
That's right.
A variety of things, true crime, psychological concepts.
Yeah, so I think to keep it sort of manageable and contained, it would include things that are there's a nationalist ideology, meaning there is this concept of the country is the most important thing. The rest of the world can burn as long as this country is safe. That's number one. Number two, there's this concept of white supremacy, which is that the white Aryan race is superior. And whether you are somewhat charitable to the other races or not, either way, you believe in that superiority. That's part of it.
And by white, they mean Central and Western European.
Right, a more narrow.
Of a certain type, right?
You know? It's not even just like light skin colored. No, it's even more specific.
Right.
So that's the second part. And I think the third part is a cultural one. Basically that quote Western culture with that is very developed out of the Catholic Church tradition, or at least the church tradition, if you don't necessarily. And it has that as a foundation, and that's really important. And then all the cultural outcrops with the classical music and the art and all these things are super important. So it's
and therefore, the opposite is also being held by Nazis and neo-Nazis, that people who don't fit within that category are lesser, they are savages, they're not intelligent, they're prone to crime, and we need to keep them out of the country.
It threatens those three things. It threatens the country, it threatens the white power, and it threatens the culture.
Yeah. I mean, I would also say that sexism and misogyny and male supremacy, chauvinism, is also a part of it.
I think that's a result from both the cultural part, because the religious aspect comes from a tradition of complete,
or just traditionalism, if you will. Okay, so we've briefly defined neo-Nazism, and then the question is, does Elon Musk adhere to those principles? Right. How do we answer the first part of that question? Does he adhere to those principles? How do we know?
Yeah, so in an ideal state, we would be able to look at his book he wrote or his long video treatise on the subject or something. But in absence of that, what we got to see is, are there enough points of evidence through public comments, public actions, actions with his companies, that point in the direction of adherence to those principles.
Right.
That's my thinking.
Right. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
He isn't a formal member of a neo-Nazi organization. He doesn't march with them when they're saying Jews will not replace us in Charlottesville. So we can't know for sure. So we're looking for evidence, right? And this question is emerging right now for a lot of people because Elon Musk gave the Nazi salute at Trump's inauguration.
Twice. Twice.
And I thought we would start by watching that. Any reaction thus far?
He's always a physically awkward individual. This is just not new. Every time I've ever seen a Tesla presentation, whatever it is, even when I used to like the guy, it was always like, he's a nerd. He's always awkward and stuff. And at the same time, there is a level of grandiosity to this, right? Like even though his actions are kind of dorky looking, you can tell that he's like, his arms up and he's like, yes, this is grand. And he's just like,
I guess
in the
it raises
moment.
a question. And of course, we're biased observers, so we're filtering it through that. I'm sure there are lots. And so to start off, I think you could be right. And many people might see it that way. He might see it that way. But as we move forward, I want to delineate between what is confirmed fact and what is speculative regarding what is in his mind, what is his intention with that.
Sure.
With that gesture.
Yeah, I guess I was referring to it from a perspective of, I've seen a lot of, over the years, lots of leaders come out when there are cheering crowds. And there are different reactions that you can see. And to be fair, they could all be an act, right? Every time we see one and one looks different than the other, everyone's acting to a certain extent. But I will say one thing that's not happening as he's coming out is like, how do I say this? I didn't get a sense of like, oh wow, I'm humbled by, I got more of a sense of we've done it, we're here, like, and it's kind of a triumphant thing, which in many contexts there's nothing wrong with, but that's the sense I get.
And I don't tend to watch these kind of political rallies because that's all that it is. I mean, officially it's an inauguration celebration, which I guess you could consider to be some form of rally.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that regardless of political affiliation, there's some pretty cringy behavior. Like even politicians that I support when they're at events like this, they'll say anything and the whole crowd will laugh and clap and stuff. And I'm just like, everything they do, they just raise their hand in a gesture and the whole crowd goes, yay. It's like, oh boy, this isn't thoughtful, wise citizenry regarding the real issue is like, how are you going to vote on X, Y, anyway. But let's watch.
There are elections that come and go. Some elections are, important. Some are not. But this one, this one really mattered. And I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you. My heart goes out to you. It is thanks to you that the future of civilization is assured.
Thoughts?
The first thing is he says, this is what victory feels like. And that's why I was saying that his actions, although clumsy or awkward, they weren't just like, oh, wow, look at this crowd. It was, we are here. We have arrived. This is what victory feels like. And the rest of his words that follow are that this was the most important election ever, and you've done it. And then he proceeds to give the Nazi salute twice. And then he says that you have saved the future of civilization. Think about the grandiosity of those words. This isn't like, we did it. We won this term. Like, no, you have saved the future of all humanity. So in his mind, this isn't about like just this one appearance on stage, this election. He sees himself as that future, the leader of that future. Mm-hmm. That's what's going on.
Let's watch it again because everyone is talking about this. And I will say that when I first saw the screen capture and then I saw the clip of just the salutes or the gesture, it very much looked like a Nazi salute. And when I see the just before and just after, it lowers the likelihood a little bit, but not a lot. I mean, to cut to the chase, he's not an oblivious Gen Xer or boomer or something. He not only lives perpetually online and on Twitter, he owns Twitter. He bought Twitter because he's obsessed with Twitter. But he's been obsessed with Twitter since the very beginning of Twitter. Not only that, but he also has, we know by the evidence of the things that he retweets and amplifies, that he lives in the neo-Nazi Twitter universe. You could imagine someone's algorithm on Twitter not really showing them a lot of neo-Nazi stuff, and so it's not a part of their daily or weekly life or something. But we know that He watches that stuff.
Yeah.
Probably a lot more than he actually amplifies or comments on, And so of all the people on the planet, he probably knows the Nazi and specifically the white power salute more than anyone else.
But everyone does.
Well,
sure.
not everyone. In fact, most people think what he's doing, what they would say is a Nazi salute, but it is specifically a white power salute. The fact that he does heart then this.
Yeah, that's what Hitler did. They all know.
Yeah.
Everyone knows. And by the way, this is like, if he comes out and he flips the bird out, but he's saying like, oh, we're number one or whatever. And then people are like, well, that was awkward because he's autistic or whatever. Number one, the actual gesture by definition was flipping the bird. The second question is, did he mean to flip the bird? That motion by definition is the Nazi salute.
Right.
Now, he did it twice. Then the next question is, was he intending to give a Nazi salute? And then what does he intend with that salute? And so
right. So that's what we're attempting to answer.
Yeah.
The main question that we're trying to answer is what is in his mind given what he just did. And I'm going to go over all the options, and it's all speculative. We can't know what's in his mind. But we can know that he absolutely knows what the Nazi salute is.
Yep.
He did it twice.
Yep.
It is extremely unlikely that he would do that even in the moment, even if he's like overwhelmed with the emotion of the moment. It doesn't make any, he knows of anyone that in fact, he's probably ran into many moments where he has done a random gesture with his hands and people will tweet and say, look, he's doing the Nazi. He probably has had meetings with his PR team about getting out ahead of certain accusations or something. So he's not just a random person that just, if they just plucked a random citizen and they had a gaffe or they did a gesture that kind of looked like a Nazi suit, you'd be like, well, he knows. He absolutely knows what he's doing. And the fact that his follow-up reaction to this is also a potential indication that he knew what he was doing and planned it. But we don't know. But anyway, let's rewatch this.
By the way, when you watch it again, notice the end of the motion. I want us to look at the intensity and what I would call underlying rage of the end of that motion.
Right. Because it's a good point. Because presumably he is... And a lot of people are saying, defenders are saying, that this was my heart goes out to you. In what universe would that rage in his face and that the intensity of I don't know what to say, like the rigidity of his arm, and plus like,
it's like
when he turns around, he's looking up. So you could argue that, he's like, my heart goes out to you up there. But when he's facing the crowd, they're all below him. So if you want to do my heart, I know that it's just ridiculous, but this is what we have to do, because if my heart goes out to you, you would do this.
Like
you
this.
wouldn't
He's
do,
done this
you wouldn't
before.
go up. You wouldn't, I don't even want to do it because I don't want to.
He's actually done this before. He's like done the little heart symbol and gone like this. But even if he doesn't consistently do that, like there's no universally understood, like, well, that's the sign for my heart goes. No, that is the Nazi salute.
Right.
You could think that you could repurpose it. It's like imagine if I'm doing like a shotgun pump action, like I love my patrons and I'm like shooting them in the face. It's like, what? I was loving my patrons. What?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Or another one would be like if we were to say like, like I was at the thing and I was, and it's like, what? I was just saying, I was putting salt on my burger. What are you talking about? Anyway, which is a euphemism for jacking someone off.
His daughter made a great tweet analogy with this because she came out and said we should call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And later when she got, of course, a ton of hate, she's like, what? I was just talking about cart suits. And then she made like this thing about how like everything's plausible deniability.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you.
Yeah, so actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to slow this down to slow-mo. And that's not always fair, but I want to slow it down just to really take in every micro movement here.
Thank you.
So from the start, he bites his lower lip. Okay, this is speculative, but it just kind of looks to me like he had practiced this in the mirror. Which we wouldn't be, if he was intending on doing a Nazi salute for whatever reason, whether it's because he wants to be pro-Nazi or he's trolling or whatever, which we'll get into, or a combination, whatever. It just has that look. And because if it was a spontaneous gesture of my heart goes out to you, it just seems like he wouldn't have this whole shift in his face. It's almost like he knew, okay, if I do it like this,
here's where it goes.
This is what, this will be the screenshot. There's like a perfect screenshot in another half second. Where his face is angry and his arm is in the just a full-on Nazi salute. How could you possibly say, I was trying to say my heart goes out to you. My heart goes out to you, people in the audience that are below me. And I want to say my heart goes out to you. You know, I'm doing it like this, right? That's what I do. I gesture to my heart, and then I make my arm into a rigid 45-degree angle. How is that heart going out to someone? Is your heart...
And by the way, you notice that he didn't say, my heart goes out to you, and then he does a motion.
Right.
He does the motion twice. And afterwards, he, as a postfix, goes, my heart goes out to you.
Yeah, and his demeanor kind of changes. I think indicating that he's in a mental space. Who knows? But let's watch this again in normal time.
Thank you. My heart goes out to you.
Yeah, every time I watch it, it seems more and more like he knew he was going to do it. He knew it was going to cause a reaction. He was feeling something in the moment. Because you even hear him grunt. He's like, ugh, like, fuck you, liberals. And then he like recovers after it and thinks, okay, now next line. And then his face kind of changes. It's all speculative, but it just kind of has that look to it.
And so even without discussing, which definitely we will, like what the underlying motives in his head are, it's quite possible that on the surface, he literally told one or several of his closest buddies, watch what I'm going to do. And in his head, he had this whole thing like mapped out where he's like, because he's thinking, and again, I believe there's deeper motivations, but even at the surface level, you know that he's thinking, this victory, remember, this is what victory feels like. This victory is so defining that I could literally come out on that stage, give the Nazi salute, and be fine.
Right. Because anyone who was following the race for the U.S. presidency knows that the dominant discourse, particularly for Republicans and the right, was around immigration and around anti-social justice. That was the primary thing they were talking about. Immigrants eating cats, that kind of thing. And, they were talking about a lot of things, but in terms of the main message, the wall, all that kind of stuff, it was clear. A lot of rhetoric around that. And Elon Musk himself, has talked a lot about and amplified a lot of tweets and videos about anti-immigration, not only in the United States, but also in Europe. And so what better gesture to make? Because that's what we just did. We won. Fascist, Nazi, anti-immigrant, white power. It's explicit. And the other thing I want to point out is that Jimmy Carter, he recently died, but if he made an awkward gesture that looked like a Nazi salute, none of us would think it was a Nazi salute because we know him and his track record. Elon Musk, if he just was a random CEO that we didn't know of and he did something like this, at least for me, I would say, well, who knows what, it could have been awkward. Maybe he doesn't really. The fact that we assume that it is a Nazi salute isn't just out of left field. It's because he has, and we'll get into it, all the things that he has said and done. It's not just racist shit that he has tweeted and said and amplified. It's specifically white power neo-Nazi shit, anti-Jewish people, anti-Semitic posts that he has, like really crazy conspiracy theory. Jews will not replace us kind of bullshit. And so when he does this gesture and we're supposed to like give him the benefit of that, why would we give him the benefit? No. And even if it isn't, even if he doesn't mean to, let's say he didn't, it was awkward or it was the way that it's stated by him. Not adamantly, by the way. He's not adamantly stating that it was not a Nazi salute.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter because he's already indicated and it doesn't take a genius to speculate that he, at the very least, is a white nationalist neo-Nazi sympathizer, which is just bizarre. You know, it's one thing to like be interested in like Pat Buchanan or something. It's another thing to look at neo-Nazi conspiracies about Jewish people taking or, you know, already in control of the world and invading all of our lands and taking over, to even entertain the idea that those videos and those ideas are positive or...
And I want to make something clear. So if I saw a video of a baby, an innocent little baby, not even a white baby, like whatever, pick your race, denomination, whatever, a baby doing a Nazi salute, I would say, well, that's a Nazi salute. Now, of course, I would give the baby the benefit of the doubt, and I certainly wouldn't condemn the baby. The baby doesn't know. He's just doing actions, and it happened to look like a Nazi salute. When we're talking about an adult, you could think of the nicest person you can think of, Mr. Rogers. If I saw Mr. Rogers giving a speech and he gives a Nazi salute, I know two things. One, something happened in the moment where he wasn't thinking clearly. Two, he would apologize for the rest of his life. Right? Even though he literally didn't mean it as a Nazi salute, right? And so that's the very telling thing, is like whether or not you think someone meant to do something or not, what they do afterwards is also really important.
Right. So we'll get into that after the break. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, back from the break. I'm just curious what happens immediately after this. I don't know if it's related, but I'm curious what happens immediately after.
It is thanks to you that the future of civilization is assured. Thanks to you. We're going to have safe cities, finally, safe cities. Secure borders, sensible spending, basic stuff. And we're going to take Doge to Mars.
God, he's such a dork.
But this is not accidental either. The things that he's saying. So again, think about it. You have secured the future of civilization. What is the mental model here? Is it that because the US is such a good, loving country, it will steer humanity better to save against climate change and to bring poverty to an end and cure cancer? Or is there potentially a different meaning, which is the right people, the right humans will inherit the future? And then he ends, or he doesn't end, but he makes this point about Mars, right? And the whole Mars ideology is part of it too. And you got to wonder, what would his Mars future look like? Who's in charge? What is that or that civilization like? Right. And I think that there's interesting answers to that, but it's all rooted into this bigger, grandiose ideology. So
let's look at what his response was. So let me ask you, Berto, if he was not a neo-Nazi, that's just asking. So if he's not a neo-Nazi,
yeah,
I can't even finish this question. If Elon Musk is not a Nazi,
right,
and he accidentally did a gesture that very much looks like a Nazi gesture, right, how do you think he would respond immediately after making this speech?
He would throw himself under the bus in a polite way. He may or may not embrace the whole neurodivergent thing, who knows, but he would at the very least say something along the lines of like, I'm so sorry. I definitely would have never intended that. Here's why I hate all that, and I denounce those or whatever. I was literally trying to do this. You can ask such and such. I do make awkward, whatever. So some combination of statements that made it feel like he acknowledges that no matter what's in his heart, it definitely didn't look good. And here's how he is sorry and why it's not really a Nazi salute.
Right. So what he did say was the following. He said on Twitter, frankly, they need better dirty tricks. The quote-unquote everyone is Hitler attack is so tired. End of tweet. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, like you pointed out just a little bit ago, the one thing it's not is a straight denial, right? It's definitely, to start with, it's not, of course it wasn't a Nazi salute, right? It starts off with they, so grouping everyone who had a problem with his Nazi salute into a they that is calling everyone Hitler. So he's doing a straw man argument right off the bat. Oh, so you're saying I'm Hitler, right? Which, by the way, preview of coming attractions, because the other straw man that ends up getting set up and assisted by some of his cronies, really, is that he is anti-Semitic. And so like he'll pivot to that, like, oh, I am not anti-Semitic. But you will not hear him say, I'm so sorry, that was not a Nazi salute. I didn't mean to do that. Yeah. You will not hear that.
Yeah. And maybe even, I know that I have amplified some neo-Nazi accounts. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And I understand now that those posts are horrific in their rhetoric.
And I'm a genius, so of course I understand how people would make the connection. Right. And I get that I'm at the inauguration for a party that does say that national borders. I totally understand, because I'm a genius. I'm probably the smartest person ever alive.
Right. So I was, this is in my notes too, and we've talked about this before, and to quote you, which should have been on your t-shirt as well, you can't have it both ways. Yes. That you can't be a genius from outer space that is quite possibly the smartest human being to have ever lived, and also accidentally completely reproduce the white power Nazi salute twice on the biggest stage he's probably, he's been on stage before, he's been in the news before, but he probably knew that this was possibly the most important stage event he would ever be on. So the fact that it happens almost immediately as soon as he has the microphone, he does it twice, it's undeniably, if you ask someone to reproduce the white power Nazi salute, you would, and you allowed someone to practice for a while, it wouldn't be as good as that.
Exactly.
So that's not like a minor reproduction. No. So either he completely just accidentally did that, and he's a complete doofus that knows the Nazi salute, but doesn't have enough brain power to avoid doing a Nazi salute while he's...
Whoopsie! I don't know.
So, or he's not the genius that you think, or he's kind of smart and he's a Nazi sympathizer. So another thing that he tweeted was the following. So this is someone posting a screen cap of Twitter on Reddit, and Elon Musk reposted. So he retweeted, because they don't have retweeting anymore, I guess. I guess they now call them reposting, in which some account called End Wokeness compared a gesture that Taylor Swift made to Hitler making the Nazi salute. But if you watch the full...
Oh, yeah. Can we watch the video?
Well, I'm not going to bother, because there's a lot of other... There's also...
I know. I've seen them with...
There's also Kamala Harris as well as another one that is going around. And honestly, if I were Kamala's
advisor,
I'd be like, okay, point, but don't make a flat hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we all know you're. Exactly. But the thing is when this happened, even the Republicans didn't tweet this because no one thinks that Kamala is a Nazi.
Right.
So, and the fact that Taylor Swift did this gesture, no one cared, or at least very few people, because no one thinks Taylor Swift's a Nazi. The fact that Elon Musk does this and everyone's freaking out isn't because he did the gesture. It's because it's just another tick in the column. And that's another, I just want to say this again. He has been accused of being a Nazi many times, probably literally millions of times. Yeah. He's probably only seen a percentage. Taylor Swift and Kamala Harris probably don't get accused of it. And if they are, the accusations are probably really ridiculous. The accusations for Elon Musk are not ridiculous.
Right.
And yet, on the biggest stage, what looks to be a planned gesture, and he goes, and he bites his, and he's like angry. This is me giving my heart to you.
And then turns around and does it even arguably more by the book. So the reason the videos of these things are relevant is, going back to your gesture earlier, imagine if there's a photo of me holding my hand like this, right? And I'm like this. People could be like, oh my gosh, Berto is doing some obscene hand gestures. But if you watch the whole video, and the video is me going like this and being like, I sometimes like try to close my arm around the bar. Okay, now we're not making an obscene gesture. But if the video is of me doing this kind of thing, now we're having a conversation. So when the video is you stand at attention, your hand goes to your heart in the same place that Mr. Adolf would put it, and then your arm extends in the right acceleration and ends at the right angle with the right force and intensity, and then you turn around and you do it again. Yeah. Now we're having more of a conversation.
So the Anti-Defamation League on Twitter stood up for Elon Musk, actually. What is the Anti-Defamation League?
My understanding is it is a group that is always on the lookout for attacks against Jewish people or Jewish groups in the form of, certainly statements, actions, attacks, things like that. Yeah.
So presumably they would have an educated understanding of anti-Semitism, and also not only of just like gestures that look like the Nazi salute, but also particularly Elon Musk. They probably have staff that pay attention to the things that, or have had to respond to some of the things he said. This is what they tweeted. "This is a delicate moment," just chiming in, referring to, I think, the inauguration.
Well, so right there already. Oh, it is? So the context that you're already setting up for us is that it is a delicate moment. I wonder what makes it delicate.
They go on to say, "It seems that Elon Musk made an awkward gesture in a moment of enthusiasm, not a Nazi salute. But again, we appreciate that people are on edge. In this moment, all sides should give one another a bit of grace, perhaps even the benefit of the doubt, and take a breath." End of quote. So on one hand, we have to understand that the Twitter account might be run by one person, an intern even. I mean, it's not necessarily something that is vetted by all interested parties. And I'm quite positive that in the ADL, there's a variety of takes.
Opinions and of course.
Because it's just natural that would be the way. It's also possible that they did all confer and basically all decide that this was going to be their statement. We just can't know. I don't know the answer to that question. The other thing is that the ADL deals with just flat out Nazi and flat out statements from people online and otherwise that want to kill Jewish people. For them, they see the worst of the worst, naturally. But the question is, why would the ADL err on the side of giving Elon Musk the benefit of the doubt?
Yeah, I have a probably more cynical take on it. I'm not saying that they're evil and they're like, haha. But I will say two things. One, Musk, on the record, is a big supporter of Israel. And Netanyahu, is that how you say it? Bibi Netanyahu? He came out in support of Musk, saying, no, Musk is definitely a huge Israel supporter, et cetera. So right off the bat, here's the second straw man I was talking about. Yes, the Nazis exterminated, 6 million Jewish people, something like that?
Yep.
Yes, the Nazis wanted the Jewish population from Europe, potentially from the world, gone. Yes. And the Nazis also wanted to take over all of Europe, ideally probably the whole world. And they also didn't want all the other races, right? So a neo-Nazi salute in the inauguration of a nationalist, like white power presidency and stuff, isn't just a threat to Israel or isn't just a threat to Jewish people. It's a threat to everyone, really. So right off the bat, I don't like the idea that, wait a minute, Musk says he supports Israel. The leader, the current right-wing fascist leader of Israel, says he's cool with the salute. Okay, well, never mind then. I don't. That's crazy. That's a straw man. And I think the ADL probably is subject to some of that. Wait, cognitive dissonance. But Musk is a big Israel supporter, and the leader of Israel just said he's fine. Okay, it's probably just a mistake. It's fine. And to be fair to them, maybe there's also a level of like, let's try to de-escalate.
Right.
But I have a question. Imagine if which by the way, might actually happen. Imagine that as a wink, let's keep the troll going, a whole bunch of MAGA supporters start, just like they started wearing diapers and whatnot. Imagine that they start using this salute, winking and nodding and saying, my heart goes out to you from here on out. And now we start seeing the rallies, the president, all the things, everyone's doing it.
Wow.
And it's visually indistinguishable from fucking rally.
I hadn't thought of that, but of course that's going to happen. Anything that, owns the libs,
Right.
they will do.
So then what would the ADL say in that case? Oh, well, no, but now they're just referencing the thing Musk did. They're not really Nazi salutes.
Yeah, undoubtedly, there's 1,000 merchandise makers that are already selling
My heart goes out to you t-shirts.
and with Elon making that gesture. Yeah. Okay. So let's take a break. And when we get back, let's watch Joe Rogan. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right. So this is just me chiming in here after I recorded this entire episode with Umberto, which was a couple hours as we were recording it. Afterwards, I was just scrolling through Reddit. And of course, I came across what Umberto had predicted. A conservative politician in Pennsylvania posted on TikTok. Well, you can watch the following. And if you're just listening to this, it's a woman clearly doing a Nazi salute.
Checking in on my friends who are struggling this week. My heart goes out to you. Hope you're doing okay.
Then the next day, she actually resigned, presumably because she was asked to resign or else she would be fired. So I guess there's some justice, but my God. All right, so let's take a break. Get back to me and Umberto. All right, back from the break. So on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, Joe Rogan is talking with someone, I don't know who, about the salute. So let's watch this.
My friend Kurt Metzger told me this. We were talking about the Elon gaffe, where he's like, my heart goes out to you.
So
like, hey,
silly.
Don't do that, though.
That's the perfect example of when you see a story, you
Yes.
believe it's true. If you believe he's a Nazi,
Right.
you're going to see him do a silly hand gesture and see that as that.
Well, he's saying my heart goes
Right,
out to
to
you.
you.
But that is how the
Fingers-
Nazis did it.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. This is what I found out last night. That's also how they used to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, really?
The Pledge of Allegiance used to be done like this until the Nazis came along. And then we switched it to this. Your hand over.
So, okay, fine. Fine. I didn't know that, but even if it is true, before the Nazis, because prior to the Nazis, there's no Nazis. And so you have not the association with that hand gesture. And once there were Nazis, according to what Joe Rogan is saying, someone else was saying, they decided that the Pledge of Allegiance should not use that gesture. It wasn't a Nazi salute beforehand, but now it's sort of like with the swastika. When you go to Eastern Asia, you will see the reverse swastika because that's a religious symbol. And it's always been a religious symbol to them. And they continue to use that. In the States, the same religion wouldn't use that symbol because the Nazis have ruined it, Then they decide, okay, we can't do that gesture anymore. So everyone decides to no longer do the gesture. How many years has it been since 1940? What was that, 60, 70, 80, 85 years? So 85 years later, when the Nazi salute is still very much associated with Nazis, you have someone who's on stage doing the Nazi salute. What's the argument, Joe Rogan, that Elon Musk is from 1935 and he just did a time machine and showed up on stage and he could viably say, what are you talking about? We used to do this gesture for the Pledge of Allegiance. It doesn't make any sense. Fine. You could say, okay, 5,000 years ago, they used to use this gesture to mean something else. When the Nazis were Nazis and they did this gesture, it now was the only thing that was being communicated when you're doing that gesture, So it's just a ridiculous argument.
Musk was born in South Africa and not 80 years ago. So it's even if it was like, well, remember, as school children, we all did this, and Musk was a school child with me here. No, he was born in South Africa, was raised in South Africa. There wasn't even a Pledge of Allegiance he grew up with in 80 years ago that he's used to.
Right.
So it doesn't even hold water from that angle.
Yeah.
And the swastika thing is a perfect analogy because you could imagine someone coming on the same stage and wearing a T-shirt with a swastika. Actually, imagine Ramaswamy or someone was coming up as part of he got fired from Doge, but imagine he was still there and he's wearing a T-shirt with the swastika. But it's the Indian version of the swastika. And everyone's like, you're wearing a swastika. He's like, what? This is a symbol that goes back to the what?
Well, a better analogy, which is it's a good analogy, is if he got up on stage and then he takes off an outer shirt and it shows a swastika, and then he walks off stage, and then the next day there's this big controversy, and he just casually says like, "What's the big deal?" In your analogy, he was like, "What are you talking about? This, Elon Musk didn't do that."
Yeah, he doesn't
say what. I thought I was just doing the Pledge of Allegiance from 1935. He's not saying that.
He doesn't even explain that. Yeah.
Right, because that's ridiculous.
Everyone else explains it for him.
Right.
So the analogy is basically everyone else says, no, Ramaswamy meant it was the thing from India. And by the way, that's not as close to this, because maybe there would be a cultural connection there.
Absolutely.
Right? So
There's nothing in our culture, South Africa or United States or Canada, let's include the whole thing, that has anything that would have the full white power salute, hand over heart, arm extended in, like the ones that they're bringing up of Kamala Harris and Taylor Swift and others. It's not as close of a gesture. It's not at the exact, angle and the exact arm movement.
And the motion,
and the whole motion, right? It's all of the other ones are screen captures, but when you see the whole gesture, it's just like, well, like Kamala Harris is pointing and then her hand goes like this. None of them are, and Taylor Swift is reaching out to people and she's waving. She's like, oh, hi people, hi people. He wasn't doing that. And if he was doing heart out, he would go, my heart goes out to you, like this. Anyway.
Do you remember the Laura Ingraham one? Because that was someone who's aware of what they're doing, but trying to disguise it. What she would do is she had her hand out, like Nazi salute, but it was kind of like a subtle like wave. And she did it at one of those big rallies and stuff. And of course, everyone was like, dude, you're doing a Nazi salute. And she's like, what? I'm just waving. That was someone who knew what they were doing, but were trying to hide it. To your point, in this case, he's not even coming out and trying to offer explanations. He's letting everyone else spin explanations. And
So one of the speculations that people are bandying about, which let's entertain for a bit, is that he is drugged on ketamine and he's out of his mind. And one of the video clips that people have been watching is the following. I found a little GIF. In this GIF is a clip of Elon Musk in the background when someone else is giving a speech. So he's in a crowd of conservative Republican luminaries. You can actually see the top of Trump's head right in front of him. And if you're not watching the video of this with us, if you're just listening to the audio podcast, Elon Musk is moving his head back and forth in this. It looks like a cartoonish version of someone tripping. And he's looking up into the air, and he just seems like, I don't know, it's hard to interpret what's going on.
Yeah.
But I will say that we know from him that he does use ketamine, possibly in the beginning for therapeutic purposes, and he reportedly would say that he would use it every couple weeks, and it was helping him. It is used for psychiatric purposes. But do you know if we heard that he was claiming to use it more often than a couple weeks?
He hasn't.
Okay.
But people that know him, that know him closely, have said that. But
said what?
That he uses it a lot, that he abuses it. But.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. Yeah. So here's what I'll say about that, because I have worked with a lot of clients who have used ketamine psychiatrically. The behavior that we see, and I have to actually minimize this window, otherwise it's going to disturb me. Is it possible that he was high on ketamine and that resulted in that odd head eyes gesture? Yes, but there's no way to know for sure. There's a lot of other explanations. He could, again, be trolling. He could be just kind of humming to himself. He could be high on a different drug. He could also be high on ketamine and not doing that because he's high on ketamine.
Right.
He's just doing it for some other reason. Who knows? Maybe if we looked at all the footage available, he's been doing that gesture since he was a kid. He just, when he's bored or when he's daydreaming or when he's trying to soothe himself or whatever, we just don't know.
But medically, you can confirm 100% that the one thing ketamine is reported to always do is it forces your body to do Nazi salutes, right? That part's
Yeah. Right. The question is, I think from both fans and non-fans of Elon Musk, is that everything that he's doing that is untoward or odd or problematic, a result of ketamine use. And in line with what you're saying, there's a lot of people prescribe ketamine, and I'm just going to take a guess and say that Nazi salutes are not something found. Now, might someone's judgment be impaired? Sure. Might someone start to develop some level of aggression or paranoia? Yeah. Ketamine is an odd compound. There's a lot of different effects at different dosages, depending on the mindset of the individual, depending on the regimen, the tolerance level of the individual. It has a lot of varying effects. Now, what I'll say is that my guess is that there's a lot of circumstantial evidence pointing in the direction that he has been using ketamine more and more. The things that he said, it seems to me that he is a highly traumatized individual walking around with a lot of psychiatric issues related to PTSD and trauma, and does not want to talk about his feelings, as a lot of people don't, and is looking for a magic bullet in a psychiatric medication. Ketamine does help and does help him to regulate or does help him to sleep or something, particularly in acute anxiety or acute distress. It's quite likely that's the case. In some interviews when he was talking about his ketamine use, that does seem to be what it was prescribed for, and it does seem to be working, and I'm happy that he does have that available to him. But his underlying trauma issues are not going away.
right.
And what can happen is that you end up using it more and more over time. It can become habit forming for sure. The euphoria and your tolerance level can go up, so you need more. And without any checks and balances, which we could imagine if there were any, he would eliminate those, right? Like if one physician were to start questioning him regarding his usage or about, talking about, well, maybe we should titrate or we should talk about another medication because this is habit forming. You could imagine Elon Musk would not have to do much to find another physician that would think otherwise. So, or Elon Musk, as a lot of people will do, that they just stop talking to their physician and the physician just doesn't really bother with checking up. Anyway, so could I imagine that he starts to take it more and more often? Could be. It's speculative. Could it affect his mindset in some ways? Possible. But seemingly before he was even taking ketamine, reportedly, he was already having some issues. And his trauma, of course, goes way back. The other thing that I could imagine is that this event, the inauguration, could be very stressful for him heading into it. There's a lot at stake. He's amped up. He's got to go on stage. Most people, if they had an anti-anxiety medication, they might contemplate taking a good dose of that so they can get through the day.
Right.
They might also be celebrating. Someone who smokes a lot of weed and gets pleasure from that, or drinks alcohol before the Oscars, if you're potentially going to get an award, and you're not being careful, you might say like, hey, what better time than now than to feel an extra boost of euphoria, relaxation,
Couple
whatever.
lines of this, couple lines of that.
Exactly. So it's pure speculation, but and could he have taken a little bit more than he intended on taking, and he is a little off kilter, and I don't know the full sequence, because he does the speech, and I think later we see him in the background.
I thought that background thing was from the previous day, from the pre-inauguration event.
Okay.
But even if it was the same event, and even if he was high on stage while he's giving the speech, one thing is for sure, he wasn't giving an incoherent, right. I'm so glad to be here.
Right, that's what I was going to say, was that regardless of when that head thing was, whether before, after, or the previous day, if he was significantly intoxicated and impaired from ketamine use, he wouldn't look like the way he looked when he was on stage.
Right.
You're either whacked out on ketamine, slurring your speech and acting in confusing ways, and not being able to string a whole 3.5 minute speech together.
Right.
Or you're not whacked out on ketamine or any substance, and you're able to put a 3.5 minute speech together.
Yeah.
Which is the way that it looked. But I don't see a lot of people claiming, "Hey, take it easy on him."
He's high on drugs.
He's just taking ketamine because of his psychiatric illnesses, and don't blame it. I see a lot of people doing that, but I just wanted to clarify that because there's a lot of people talking about this online, as we know, and there's a lot of nonsense being said about ketamine.
By the way, I think one hell of a drug is cognitive dissonance. If you can imagine an Obama or a Hillary doing a video clip where they're doing that head motion with the eyes rolling and all that stuff, that would have been the 100% proof confirmation that, in fact, they are demons. They're definitely reptilians and they're possessed, all of it, right? That, if I've ever seen one of those videos, if anything's ever made me question maybe the people in power are reptilians or weird aliens, it's that video. Because the richest, probably most powerful man in the world doing head movements like that during big events, that actually gives me pause.
Yeah. So let's get to the meat of the matter, and let's present evidence for him being a Nazi and evidence for him not being a Nazi. So in chronological order, and feel free to chime in here, Bruno.
Yeah.
The first thing that we can point to that a lot of people are talking about now is that many are saying that his maternal grandparents were Nazis. They were Canadians in Canada, and they moved to South Africa in 1950 during apartheid, and that's his mom's parents. And so it's assumed that the maternal grandparents moved to South Africa to get away from woke Canada and to move into a white supremacist government of South Africa. Also, Elon's father reportedly said that his in-laws were pro-Nazi, but we can't necessarily trust his take on things.
Well, and either way, he said he didn't get along with them because of it.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. Well, so we don't know. We don't have any hard evidence that they were Nazis. Maybe they were. Is it hard to believe that we have some white people moving to South Africa in 1950? Is it hard to believe that they were racist? No, it's not hard to believe.
Yeah, and there are a ton of second or first or second generation Germans in this country whose relatives were actual Nazis.
Yeah.
And that means that they're all Nazis?
Right. So people will say, well, just look at his history. So I just thought I'd mention that. And there's a lot of talk online, people just saying they were Nazis, and that's full confirmation that he's always been a Nazi. We don't know anything beyond what I've already said. And even if they were Nazis, we don't know if that had an effect on him at all. So, but people are saying that. Okay. Now, stronger evidence that he's a Nazi is that when he bought Twitter, he, one of the main things that he would talk about and do once he bought Twitter, and his stated reason for buying Twitter had to do with changing Twitter so that it was more friendly to what he would say is free speech, but what others would say would be racist, sexist, Nazi, problematic accounts, right? And he immediately reinstated a lot of problematic accounts, including some neo-Nazi accounts. People will say, well, that's evidence that he's a neo-Nazi sympathizer at the very least. Also, there was that whole drama when he was on stage and he says to Disney, "Go fuck yourself." That had to do that there was a larger conversation. Right. That was a part of a larger conversation around anti-Semitism and around neo-Nazi posts. And in a nutshell, and we reviewed all this in our deep dive on Elon Musk, that when he took over on Twitter and he started rolling back the algorithm, or he started, how do you word it? He started to roll back the monitoring, the
moderation. Yes.
Right. And as a function of that, there were some neo-Nazi posts that had ads next to it, like Disney and other major contributors to Twitter. And Disney and these others were saying, look, unless you start moderating, we're not going to pay for advertising on your platform. And it was seriously threatening Twitter as a viable organization. Some people were claiming that neo-Nazi posts had Disney ads all over the place. It apparently wasn't really like that. It was rare for a neo-Nazi post to have a Disney ad, but it was happening possibly more often now because of rollbacks on moderation.
And to be clear, with something like that, one time is enough for these large companies because they have a brand to protect. So
Right.
it's, yeah.
yeah. But I just want to point out that there's a lot of exaggeration happening on the reporting. And at first, he apologized to Disney and all the other. It was like a whole consortium of major advertisers on Twitter. And at first, he was like, "Oh my God, that's not what I wanted. I'm sorry. Let me try to fix it. I'll fix it." And he seemingly did put effort in. There was an effect on Twitter that seemed to indicate that he was trying to appease that and trying to comply. But long story short, advertisers continue to put pressure on Elon Musk for a variety of things along these lines. He was asked on stage about being an anti-Semite. He started talking about how he was not an anti-Semite. In fact, he's very pro-Israel and pro-Jewish people. He talked about having gone to Israel and they had reached out to him as an ally or something. It was some kind of talk like that. They the reporter continued, or the interviewer continued to ask questions along these lines. Elon, like, well, what do you think about the fact that these advertisers are continuing to put pressure on you? They might pull out completely from Twitter. Elon Musk kind of had a meltdown on stage, and he says, "Let me be clear. Go fuck yourself." He was talking to Disney and all those other companies. And so that was all part of the anti-Semitism talk, which is quite a thing, or it's quite an elaborate story. And I just summarized it very, very briefly. So
Yeah. And one thing to note is, because Musk is aligned in my mind with other quote unquote intellectuals out there, like Jordan Peterson, who have this very interesting brand of supporting Israel and supporting the Jewish people. If you ask Jordan Peterson, "Are you anti-Semitic?" I'm sure he would laugh in your face and say, like, "That question is ridiculous. How dare you?" or whatever. But the worldview is, look, Western culture is super important. Western culture, not meaning Jewish culture. It's the stuff that the white waspy Germans did. All that classical music, the Roman and Greek artists. That stuff, and the books written by mostly a lot of these Russians and others. If some of them happen to be Jewish, well, the Ashkenazi Jews have really high IQ, which is great for them. Still not where, this is their ideology. And Musk is right there with them in ideology. So they see Israel as a valid state. They definitely prefer it to the Muslim hordes and all these things. So there's a lot of alliances there. That's why they would be saying that. I also think that some of these neo-Nazis aren't probably as they aren't as invested in the more localized problem that Hitler saw, which was their European communities overrun by this Jewish people. America is a huge place, and I don't think they see it in the same terms. They do believe that Jewish people have too much power in some segments, but they don't see the population being overrun by Jewish people. That's why what they do see is like, oh, too many Mexicans, too many, Indians, too many, blah, blah, blah. And that is their bigger concern. But let's not kid around. It's not like they're not nationalistic and white supremacists and all these things. It's just that their flavor is different from the exact Hitler and, yeah.
Would you say that their brand of neo-Nazism, like your Peter Thiel's and your Elon Musk's, that is more like a corporate Nazism? You know what I mean? Where, because this is this, I'm not the first to speculate this or the first to point this out, that the belief system that is to some extent being stated by individuals in this ultra elite, I don't know what you call, like tech bro, the
technocrats,
that they see the left and liberals and Democrats as threatening their power by empowering those without power. And for themselves, they're not necessarily Nazis in the traditional sense. They're more centrally focused selfishly, which would make sense, right? That they want lower regulations. They want to make sure that those politicians that are friendly to corporations and are explicitly against welfare programs and safety net kind of stuff, and higher taxes, and politicians that are against regulations, that kind of stuff. That's their ultimate goal, is to have their corporations make more money.
Yeah.
And and the way that we went over all this in the Elon Musk deep dive, that the boardroom stockholder culture is so strong that even if you don't start off like that, or you're only kind of like that in the beginning as a CEO or as an exec, it's really hard to resist that culture because it's so laser focused on profits.
Yeah. And
regulations obviously are counter to profits, and social justice is counter to profits. So it's all about profit. It's all about the stock price going up and their entire self-esteem. Because for Elon Musk, if he doubled his wealth or his money, he wouldn't notice, because beyond a certain threshold, you get to buy everything you want,
Yeah.
Or even if his wealth was halved, he wouldn't notice, unless he just happened, to look, which I'm sure he does every minute of every day because he seems obsessed with it. But anyway, so that's the focus for Elon Musk, speculating, and that because the rhetoric that he does seem to be actually explicitly talking about is that because he's retweeted this and talked about it, that when you have immigrants who are being allowed to come into the United States or into Northwestern Europe, they often will vote liberal and for Democrats in the United States, and therefore that happening can result in more politicians, Democrats being in power, which means more regulations, which means lower profits. So it's not hard to imagine that a white rich guy would be racist against brown and black people, right? But the primary concern is we have to have Republicans win, and immigrants don't typically vote for Republicans. So we have to get rid of them, and we have to do everything we possibly can to make sure that, am I making sense?
Yes, and I think for a lot of them, that is not only true, but that's probably where it ends. I think that for someone like Musk, maybe Thiel, I know less about Peter Thiel, but maybe him as well, definitely a Jordan Peterson, there's this additional level, and definitely for Musk. For Musk, it's, in my mind, there's zero controversy in my mind about this. Musk has stated himself that his primary worldview now is between what he calls expansionists and extinctionists. The expansionists want consciousness and intelligence to survive in the universe, and extinctionists want the opposite. Whether they want it explicitly or not, they're heading in the direction of extinction. And he sees that as the ultimate noble pursuit. And so then he ends up justifying the means around that pursuit. So again, the pursuit is, he sees like, and look, this is where I remember in our deep dive, I was like, I agreed with Musk in a ton of stuff. He sees the universe in terms of like, as far as we know, we're the only consciousness around. Whether we are or we aren't, clearly the game happening in the universe is, are things going to survive or not? And most of the universe is clearly aligned against survival. So from his perspective, he's like, we got to get a move on. This is urgent. Like, we're the only consciousness around. We got to survive. So from that perspective, it all seems nice and noble, right? Because you're like, okay, well, how are we going to survive? What are the steps? But then there's this little extra droplet, like the water was looking all nice and blue.
Right. So to just pause you for a second, because this is all good, because I didn't know any of this, or only kind of knew it. That is at least the stated reason why he would say that he was interested in electric cars,
right,
and in space travel and climate change
and computers and chips, the whole thing. Yeah.
Right. So that we can help the human race to survive.
Yeah.
But then.
Yeah. And so I look at it like this beautiful blue waters, and then there's a little drop that starts spreading. It's this little drop of nasty. And what that drop is that there is an added, they're kind of like a paradox or a dichotomy. On the one hand, you've heard his obsession with having kids, right? Like, people need to have kids.
Right. So this is another tick in the column that he's a Nazi. So explain his interest in this.
Yeah. So he's very, very interested in population is going down. People are not having children. We're running out of babies.
But we have to define we.
Because is the world population stalled? Didn't we just have 6 billion, 7 billion, 8 billion? Aren't we near 9 billion? Like, the world population keeps growing. So why this obsession? If we, we're colorblind, we don't mind different cultures, or we just want more people, so that then it would actually be fine, right? Well, the world's still expanding. No, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, that white pocket, the Viking descendants, the Aryans, the true Aryans, they're going extinct. They're not having enough kids. And so that's that droplet in that water that it's not just because if it was
so to be clear, this is not speculation. He has explicitly talked about that. He hasn't explicitly said it's white people related, but he has explicitly talked about the crisis of population decline.
That's right.
He also in his personal life seems to, as he ages, have more and more children, which is fine.
Yeah.
But when you match up these statements and the fact that he's having kids with multiple women at the same time, which again is fine if everyone is consenting, who are we to judge? But it raises a question.
And again, like in his mind, he can tie it all together because you could say, wait a minute, if you want more population, why not let the immigrants in? More immigrants, more people, more babies. They have tons of babies. But we got to keep in mind what the deal is that no. And his explanation would be something like this. Listen. I'm not racist. It's just that if you let certain types in, they're going to vote against their own interests because they're going to vote for the woke mind virus. And the woke mind virus is going to destroy the world, right? So he can justify all this. But the net effect is he wants people with his cultural and skin background to rule and then escape to Mars and have a technocracy, which is what you were talking about. And by the way, I was just watching a video about this today. This is apparently Nazi ideology. He's a huge Von Braun fan, of course, big scientist stuff, who came with Operation Paperclip and all this thing, who was a Nazi, who was a rocket man, the first, big rocket man. He's a huge fan. But apparently Von Braun wrote a fictional book about going to Mars, and there's this thrust of the future of the Vikings, of the Aryans expanding into the universe. And I actually think that he really embraces this. So
we talked about this in the deep dive, and again, it's just speculative, that when he was young, he was being abused from a lot of different directions.
Right.
And as a therapist who has heard a lot of in-depth stories of abuse that adults will tell me that they went through when they were children, I can't think of a more severe case than what he went through.
Yeah.
I mean, I can think of people that are in the category. It's hard to gauge these things in terms of severity, but it's up there in my opinion.
Horrific.
His father was brutally abusive, seemingly every day, physically, emotionally, verbally to him. And according to people in the family, the father targeted Elon more than the other kids. The father was also brutally abusive to his wife, Elon's mother, to the point where Elon was actually elected in the family system to try to stop that. So the kid, when he's 5 years old, is trying to get his mom to stop punching the mother.
His dad to stop,
And there's a possibility that he was sexually abused growing up. It's very speculative, but the father seems to exhibit some issues regarding sexual boundaries at the very least.
And there's all the comments from himself, Musk, about the horrific things he can't even talk about.
Right. Elon Musk, right. Thanks for reminding me. Elon has talked about the horrific physical abuse that his father engaged in. And he follows that up with, Elon says, and there are additional things that I can't, well, what would be worse than what you've already disclosed? Well, I would speculate sexual abuse. I don't know. And the father had 2 children with one of his own stepchildren. So there's that. Anyway, and he was horrifically bullied for years. Again, one of the worst, if not the worst cases of bullying that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
He was almost killed one time. He was bullied to the point where the bullies would find out that Elon had a friend, and then the bullies bully the friend and say, we'll stop bullying you if you set up Elon, invite him into a thing, and then we'll jump him. And so Elon he finally has a friend, And then the friend, lures him into an area to be bullied and physically assaulted, and just how betraying and how all-encompassing, it's like, they can even get my friends, and just how organized and how horrific. And anyway, it went on for years. So there's that. Also, he grew up in an extremely violent community.
Yeah.
Not only because of political strife, but also just crime. I mean, him and his brother talk about regular stabbings and death and blood and, just really horrible things that were happening. So he is absolutely traumatized, and he's been through zero therapy for it.
Yeah.
So let's just imagine that he's got some difficulties, as anyone would.
Yeah.
And I forgot where I was going with this.
Well, so
why did I start this?
Because we're talking about his world delusions of escaping and living in a
Right. So when he was a young child, one of his escapes was in science fiction.
Yeah.
And one of the books that he loved was a book of exploration and colonizing Mars. So you can imagine him in the midst of all that at the age of 7, just as you and I would too, even though you and I didn't go through what he went through, an imagination, it's fun. I thought about that all the time. Even before Star Wars came out, I was obsessed with the stars and astronomy and stuff. And it's just fun to think about, let's travel the stars, right? And so you can imagine that would really set in this fantasy and this need and this hope for, it's the ultimate grass is greener.
Yeah.
If, he's 7 years old, 12 years old, if only I can get to Mars and get away from all this unsafety, all of this terror.
Yeah.
And then when he gets into his career and he starts to actually have the opportunity to maybe have his own space company and he risks everything, it wasn't likely to work. We went over all this in the deep dive. And, you can see how all this would be woven together in relation to what you were saying earlier.
Absolutely. And a really key thing here is, in his mind, he's done all these permutations because he really believes his own doctrine, right? Which is he sees himself as the ultimate expansionist, the ultimate anti-extinctionist. He needs humanity, or more importantly, consciousness to survive, intelligent life to survive in whatever shape. That's the story, in whatever shape, right? So when presented with the pragmatic, realpolitik facts on the ground of, let's see, one party is, I can manipulate this situation to get nearly unlimited funds towards my goals. Yes, this will likely accelerate the global destruction of the climate in this planet, but I don't know if we can even stop that at this point. So this is my only real ticket out of here. The other party supports all these foo-foo woke ideologies that are really going to destroy us because no one's going to want to work hard. Everyone's going to be like, I got to align with these guys. Not only that, but they've personally attacked me. They've, like all these things. Right. So now it's a machine. And when you tie it all together, his tribe does Nazi salutes in the end. So even though for now it's like a wink and a nod, a troll, a thing, in the end, the tribe that is going to Mars will do that Roman Nazi salute all the way to Mars.
Okay, so to go through my notes regarding other things that I could think of in support of him being a Nazi is that he has posted and retweeted a lot of things on Twitter that are not just racist, but just full-on neo-Nazi stuff. For example, he retweeted a full-on neo-Nazi propaganda video about the Great Replacement. We talked about this in the deep dive. And in this video, they say Jews will not replace us. And, I could imagine, even myself a few years ago, or even just like last year, if I heard that chant, Jews will not replace us, I might not know what that means. It doesn't sound good, but it means so much more than just the statement. It's a signal. It's a horrific statement anyway, but it's a signal for neo-Nazism and the Great Replacement, which we've already been over. And absolutely, he would know what this video was talking about. And he retweeted it and said, "This is actually happening!" Exclamation point. It doesn't get any more neo-Nazi than that. I mean, if that was all that happened, I would say, holy shit, he's a neo-Nazi. But that's not all that's happened. But again, if that was all that happened, I would say, holy shit, Elon Musk is. I wouldn't need to see a Nazi salute. I wouldn't need to get all the other stuff. That's all I would need. So there's that. He also has amplified a number of neo-Nazi posts. We can look at this one is from someone named the artist formerly known as something. And it says, okay, Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of dialectical hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. I'm deeply disinterested in giving the tiniest shit now about Western Jewish populations, coming to the disturbing realization that those hordes of minorities that support flooding their country don't exactly like them too much. You want truth said in your face. There it is. So Elon Musk retweeted this. It is a blatant attack and just straight down the middle neo-Nazi shit. And Elon Musk read that and thought about it, knew exactly what he was doing, and supported that, which is it's just mind-blowing, and I don't think enough people, people see the Nazi salute and they're just like, whoa. To me, yeah, whoa, but also makes sense.
Yeah.
He's been the thing that a lot of people that are following the story of Elon Musk and is he a Nazi, what they always say is, you don't have to guess, you just have to listen to him.
Yeah.
If someone is standing on the corner saying, I'm a neo-Nazi, and then they do a Nazi salute and you're thinking, oh, I wonder if he's a Nazi. You don't have to, you don't have to ask, you don't have to wonder. You just have to look at his goddamn behavior. And again, if it was just one, and later on he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what the great replay. I thought they were just talking about stronger borders. I didn't know what all that meant. He doesn't say that.
No.
So, and then he doubles down dozens of times over the span of a couple years now of him retweeting this sort of thing. And not just U.S. stuff, but he's trying to meddle with UK politics and European. He's retweeted Holocaust denial stuff and many others.
Yeah.
And in my notes, again, some talk about populating the world with white children. And there's at least another dozen to hundreds of other things that he has said in public spaces or things he's tweeted that people speculate or strongly believe has to do with neo-Nazism. And I'll just summarize by saying some are more convincing than others. Okay, so evidence against him being a neo-Nazi, which at this point it's like, well, come on. But here's the evidence against that people will say. So one is that his family was on paper anti-apartheid. His father, a local politician in the 70s and 80s, was a member of the Progressive Party, which was openly opposed to apartheid at a time when it was kind of rare to be so. So there's that. But that doesn't mean that Elon Musk, in fact, you would argue Elon Musk has every reason to not follow in his father's footsteps. But okay, there's that. Up until recently, he was on paper a centrist, slightly liberal, it depended on the issue, but he voted for Democrats a number of times. So there's that. Another data point is that he will point to actions that he's taken that is pro-Israel and that he has a lot of support from Israelis, some prominent people, some prominent Jewish people and some prominent Israelis. Also, he pressured Trump to support a visa program that allows highly skilled foreign workers to work in the United States, and Trump gave in. And Trump's primary issue with his base has to do with immigration, and so he convinced Trump and pressured Trump to actually change that. So then you're thinking, well, because he's talking about people from India and stuff.
Quick question. Is that because he's a big believer in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is he going woke?
Yeah.
Or is it just because he wants to hire cheaper labor from a pool of like a much larger population than the U.S.,
right,
whose percentage of highly educated people is low, but still there's so many people there that he can pick them and pay them less?
Right. It's the latter because he said so.
I
He said that pesky Americans cost more because they demand more, whereas highly skilled people from places like India, you can pay them dirt cheap prices. And getting back to what I was saying earlier, that profits and stock prices are everything. And so that's all you need to know, is that if Trump does not allow highly skilled, very cheap workers to work for Elon Musk in the United States, then Elon Musk's profits will go down, and there you go. Conversely, he has retweeted this stuff. This isn't just speculative. That he believes, say, if Mexicans were allowed to come, regular average Mexicans to come into the United States, then they would be more likely to vote Democrat, which would mean more Democrats in office, which would mean more scrutiny on corporations, which would mean more regulations and more money for regulatory organizations, and therefore lower profits. That's all you have to know.
Yeah.
If you just think the Nazi racist angle, then that can create these anomalies. But if you think corporate profit and specifically stock price with a dash of racism, then it all makes sense to me. Another data point that people will say is, well, he did kick Nick Fuentes off of Twitter, Originally he was kicked off Twitter because he's a full-on neo-Nazi. He says, yes, I'm a neo-Nazi. Yeah. I'm a white supremacist. That when Elon took over, he reinstated a lot of accounts, including Nick Fuentes, which is pretty ridiculous. But Nick Fuentes proceeded to violate the very low bar of Twitter in terms of their requirements, and Twitter kicked him off again, whether that has to do with Elon Musk specifically or not. So that's the evidence against that I could come up with. It's not super strong. And I guess I should mention that contrary to people like Nick Fuentes, Elon Musk is not overtly stating that he's a neo-Nazi. So I guess that's another potential evidence against data point, but who knows? Yeah. So another possibility is that it's more of a sort of thing. He's sort of a Nazi. He's sort of a neo-Nazi, right? Because there can be a spectrum. And one of the things that, of course, you know a lot about is 4chan, 8chan. If you're not in that world, that culture, particularly like 10 years ago, it was all about trolling people, and Nazi rhetoric was stated by a lot of people, according to them, purely as a joke, just to get a rise out of people, just to prank people, or just to get people to get upset, or to be edgy.
But it was always a mix, because even going back 15 years when I was, looking at 4chan fairly regularly, there was always a bit of both. It was like, because the arguments would break out all the time. Like, wait, you guys are seriously saying that the white race is superior? And then someone's like, well, just look at the evidence. Look at this, look at that, blah, blah, blah. Who did ever do discoveries of blah? It would all come out, right?
Right. It's a large group of people that are specifically on the internet, but specifically in these 4chan forums. And there's a wide variety of reasons why people are making Nazi jokes. Right. Some people are doing it, because you can be making a joke about race, sort of like with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They do racist things, but the joke's on them. The joke is on the racist, right? Right. So just making a racist joke, it really just depends on the tone and what's being communicated. And also, when you make a lot of those jokes and you don't have any scrutiny around like who the joke is on, then full-on racists and Nazis can play around in that space and get their jollies, and it can also influence people. That's right. If you're a 13-year-old and you're seeing everyone making, at the very least, you think, who cares? This isn't a big deal. Why are people sensitive about this? You're just an overly sensitive cuck or something. Anyway, so he comes from that culture, and it's possible. So okay, so here's my ultimate possible conceptualization. It's basically the same conceptualization I came to in the deep dive, and this fits very neatly into that, in my opinion. There's speculations on speculations on speculations. So I just want to say that. Yeah. I haven't assessed him, obviously, and he doesn't talk enough. He talks a bit about his inner world and his trauma and the way that he thinks enough, but certainly not enough for me to draw all these connections. So just, take everything with a grain of salt. But anyway, so again, we've been over the massive trauma, and as a result of that trauma, he's a walking bundle of nerves. He's just, if you've been through that kind of trauma yourself, or you work with people who've been through that kind of trauma, you can look like you're calm. You can look like everything's fine, because what choice do you have? Plus, it's normal to feel that way. But at best, they can achieve like a 6 out of 10 on the distress scale, meaning with 10 being like your head's about to explode. So on a good day, they're a 6. And when they're an 8 or a 9, they might not really exhibit the signs. Like for me, I feel like I can get down to a 1 or a 2. When I'm a 6 or a 7, you'll notice, because it's weird for me, and I'll start to show signs of irritability or distress. But if you're, on a daily, hourly basis, vacillating between 6 and 10, it just becomes background. Wow. You're still highly distressed, but you're not necessarily signaling. Plus, if you're being abused, one of the survival techniques is to not show your distress level, because your father could literally beat you because you're crying, or because you're asking mom for help or something. So there's a lot of reasons why people don't signal. And of course, men are socialized to not signal any of this kind of stuff, or even acknowledge their emotions. So just speculation, but he could be walking around with a lot of distress, and he's basically said that, not in those words, but he's basically said that, not admitted, but just disclosed that.
And it goes along with that. We talked about this in the deep dive too. When he flips the bit into demon mode, and anyone would wonder, where the hell did that come from? Right. Why did he just viciously fire that person? It's because, at any minute, that's the level they're operating at. And all of a sudden you see a glimpse of it, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
That seems to come from nowhere.
Right. So as an adult, he pours himself into his work, and that keeps him distracted. And he's probably in a lot of distress, but he keeps it under wraps. Then he discovers Twitter, and he starts to tweet. And, the format of Twitter is such that it's easier for him to socialize on Twitter. It's easier for him to garner attention and praise and acceptance. Easier for him than in person, maybe.
Right.
And it's this reprieve from his distress, and it's also an opportunity to get approval. It's one thing to just have occasional approval because of the successes that he had already achieved by that point. In 2010, when 2009, when he took to Twitter, at that point he's 39, 40 years old, and he's already achieved a fair amount, what a lot of people would consider to be more success than they could possibly dream of, right? But it's not like every minute of every day people are like, oh my God, you're so successful, right?
Right.
And there's only so much you can do to look at your stock price to have some affirmation. But on Twitter, you can get that throughout the day. And he starts to get that throughout the day. And it's a counter to all that bullying he went through. It's not just the terror of being bullied, but also just being rejected. And then he was also socially rejected just in general, and his own siblings socially rejected him because they didn't like the way that he played with them, that he would be pedantic and critical and, just was hard to get along with.
Right.
And so he takes to Twitter, and he, for the first time in his life, and I can't emphasize this enough, and this is speculation, it's not just, I get acceptance. It's, I'm finally safe. For people that, when you go through trauma, the primary concern is that of safety. People are at that bottom level of the Maslow's triangle, right? The pyramid. They're not concerned about self-actualization or about achieving good things in relationships. What they're concerned with is, am I safe right now?
Yeah, survival.
And you can imagine someone going through what he went through in his early life, the trauma, the violence, and the isolation, that he would equate togetherness and social acceptance and friends that are there all the time as home base, as a safe place for him. And that's obviously very attractive, maybe even intoxicating, can become compulsive. So he, doubles down in that world in Twitter, and he's apparently really good at it. I don't know, but he got a lot of followers. There's a lot of CEOs around, and he was getting a lot of attention by far. You can't really think of a second place to Elon Musk. I mean, now he owns Twitter, but when you think back to, say, 2015, he's just another CEO in the world who's on Twitter. why is he so popular? Well, because of the things that he's doing in business, but also like the kinds of things he's saying on Twitter. And he's not afraid to be super adolescent and jokey and stuff. And that's important too, because he's not socializing on Twitter solely as a CEO. He seems to be socializing like a child.
Yeah.
The things that he says are very childish, even to this day. The kinds of things that he thinks to say. You know, I mean, everyone has their own vibe, but if I didn't know how old he was, if I just had his behavior, I would think, oh, you're talking about a 13-year-old, right? Or an immature 17-year-old. And I'm not putting him down, and I'm saying it's possible that it's understandable given what he went through. You know, if we aren't given the opportunity to develop and grow when we're at that age, it's just put off. And then when we're given that opportunity later, we take the world up on it. So, okay, finally, now I can be 13. Now I can be 14. Now I can have friends and be jokey and feel that fulfillment, that togetherness. And so he takes to Twitter, and then the Thailand kids incident happens. We went fully over that in 2018. I won't go back over it again, but he's trying to help. And I went line by line through all the things that he was doing, and the world was kind of turning on him, but not so much. And then that diver said that Elon Musk could take his sub and shove it up his ass. And then the world was like, oh, what's this? What's going on here? And they kind of paid a little bit of attention to it, but not much. But then Elon starts to attack this diver and calls him a pedo and all this kind of stuff. And then the world, like a Streisand effect, started paying attention to this.
Because you're saying he was in survival mode. That was literally him like, oh my God, I'm fighting for my life here.
Right. Because we understand psychology and schemas and drama, that it's not a stretch to imagine that in that moment, in his mind, of course, from the outside, it's just like, Elon, you're punching way down there.
Yeah. Relax.
Yeah. But, you know, we understand we're not rational people. We understand Elon Musk is not rational or any more rational than anyone else. And that given the safety that he was striving for in that social context of Twitter, for someone to criticize him, and you pointed out in the deep dive, isn't it interesting that it was a sexual assault
abuse?
You know, let me take this sub and shove it up your ass. You know, then it's like, is that some sort of trigger for him? Who knows? And the fact that he called the guy a pedo, it's like that. It's and then you wonder. Anyway, so he goes after this guy, and he was very immature about it, and he seemed to be unglued. Weeks later, he was, you know, shooting off, you know, ranting, angry letters to journalists, threatening them.
Hired investigators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not the actions of a rational person.
Right.
He is unglued, possibly triggered. Trauma doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
But it might explain it. Then a lot of people turn on him in that moment. And then begins the cascade, and then begins the mutual causation between the public and him. He starts to troll or attack a little bit the people of a certain political angle or a certain mindset, start to turn him, and even because, you know, he was a darling. He was loved by Colbert and all the
Tony Stark.
Yeah. And then that just cascades. It's this battle between him and his detractors. And so you could imagine him feeling like he's back at school as a kid. But now, Berto, he has power.
Right.
He has money. He has a lot of money. And so
the most money.
for the first time, he actually thinks, well, now I can find, I mean, who doesn't fantasize about that? Like, if I could only go back in time.
And the school principal is his buddy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I'm not going to lay down this time. I'm going to fight.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go after these people. And then he would. Eventually, this results in him fantasizing about buying Twitter to get even more power, because he sees the moderators with the previous Twitter execs and administration working against him to some extent. And so he buys Twitter. You know, he now owns the playground. He owns the school.
Right.
And the bullies now, in his mind, the bullies are on his property, and he can literally shut them up with the press of a button. He can say, like, I now declare you do not have a voice.
Yeah.
And these are the actions I believe of a traumatized. Doesn't excuse it.
And by the way, the people that are now his friends lifting him up, in other contexts, he would likely view a lot of them as bullies. Like, oh, you guys are bullying others. But in this case, no, because they're on his side. They're propping him up.
Right. It's a well understood psychological phenomenon that when you are abused, bullied, harmed, one of the ways to cope with it is to identify with the abuser as a way to gain power.
Yeah.
It's the way that the world has been taught to you. This is how, there are winners and losers. And if you're not a winner, you're one of the losers. If you're not an abuser, you're one of the victims. And this happens all the time. Yeah, in a very mundane, regular way. That
Absolutely.
If someone is attacked by their parents physically, sexually, it's not uncommon for those individuals, having been victimized themselves, they know what it feels like to be a victim.
Yeah.
Why are those individuals more likely to victimize? Well, because of this psychological reason.
In my mind, we are, I don't know if lucky is the right word, but maybe I'm going to use luck. We're somewhat lucky that he has the kind of damage that doesn't let him be fully in control of his schemes. And you can see this play out, for example, recently with the video game scandal, where he wants the world to believe he isn't just interested in video games, maybe decent at video games.
Right. So this fits perfect. Does it not fit perfectly into
perfectly.
So how does it? So explain this whole saga, because when it came out, I went on a whole deep dive to get because it was a game that I play.
Yeah.
So what do you know this scandal to be?
Yeah, so initially, before even the Path of Exile 2 thing, he came out on Rogan. He was talking about video games. Specifically, he was saying, Rogan asked him, so wait, so you're supposed to be like one of the top players in Diablo 4? He's like, yeah, I'm top 20 or top 10, I don't know. And he's like, wow, and Rogan's just like blown away. Because what does this mean?
So explain to the non-gamers what it means to be in the top 20 of Diablo 4 or 3.
Right. Diablo 4, so if anyone's actually played Diablo 4 a lot, it's actually not a very skill-based game, except if you're going to be one of the top players in the world, there is definitely an amount of skill. And there is a huge amount of time investment for sure. Yeah. So at the very least, it means
and put into context what you mean by because, to the average person that's not a super gamer, they're like, oh, so you got to play every day? No,
you don't sleep.
You in order to be in the top 20 of Diablo or Paths of Exile, Path of Exile.
Yeah,
you have to play nonstop and sleep in a very strategic way. You have to stay up 34. It's not uncommon for these guys to stay up 30, 40 hours.
Because they're trying to be the first in the world when the new patch releases, when the new version releases.
Yeah, because your competitors, the other 1,000 people that are also vying to be top 10, they're not sleeping.
Yeah, and they're all like 17.
And they're playing expertly.
Yeah.
Like, if you watch them play, you don't even understand what's happening because the clicks and the shortcuts, it's happening so fast. You're like, exactly. What is happening? Anyway, so he was claiming to be top 20 Diablo player.
And then and Path of Exile 2 is a way more complex game. And to be the top in the world takes even more time and even more expertise and et cetera. And the thing is, the implication is, this guy is such a mega 1,000 plus IQ individual that he can run, like, I don't know, is he CEO for like 10 companies or something? He can be the biggest contractor in the world. The only guy sending rockets to Mars with fully inhabited biospheres in the sun. This guy can reverse climate change single-handedly. He can do all of this and also be the top in the world at these video games.
Right. Which, again, if you're not in that super gamer world, you just think, well, yeah, he's a genius. He's a genius. So of course what are you gonna do? Whatever he does, but anyone that understands, like, it's physically impossible. I mean, right now he's talking to Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So he's already dropped 100 or 200 different because there's all these other people that are currently racking up. And anyway, so he says that he's top on Diablo, and then.
Okay, so then Path of Exile 2 comes out, and at some point
so a patch, or was it a...
Well, I mean, the game released, and then a patch released.
Right.
And he's live streaming himself, playing with a level 97
Right, so the speculation... So here's my speculation about this whole thing, is that he was either mistaken about what rank he was on Diablo, or he accidentally bragged, or he has an employee, because you can imagine him, given what we see with Path of Exile, that he has an employee who helps him play video games or something, and that person was pumping his ego, sort of like with Trump in golf or something, and saying, hey, did you know that you're in the top 20? Or who knows? But something led him to say he was top 20 on Diablo when there's no way he was top 20 on Diablo.
So two things. First of all, it was his account. His account was in the top, I forget what it was, top 20 or something on Diablo 4. Number one. Number two, but Diablo 4 is the kind of game where you can get boosted by people that are high enough level. Meaning, you can just follow them along and you're level, because they're getting all the experience at much higher levels than yours. And so
I think I did that with you when I was playing with you.
Yeah, so you burst through the levels really quickly. And I wasn't even, the right way to do it, which is I'm sure what Musk was doing, and in his mind it's not even cheating because it's allowed, right? It's you log in with your brand new character and your buddies are all like top characters, or at least you have someone you're paying or whatever. Right. And so it's like boosting, right?
Right. So a mature adult on Joe Rogan, if you were to say, yeah, I'm top 20, they would say, well, it's not really like I'm that good. I just am kind of good, but I draft in the wake of a lot of people that are really good because they are friendly to me and let me join their party so that I can get a lot of experience. But I like to play Diablo and I'm pretty good. He still could have bragged a little bit. You know what I mean?
I'm sure. Like, listen. Do I believe he's actually a really good gamer? Probably. He says he used to play games all the time. Here's what I don't believe, right? I don't believe three things. One, that he is spending 100 hours a week at everything he is doing. Like, so 100 times 10, right?
So to drill down on the Path of Exile. So soon after this disclosure on Joe Rogan, what it looks like happened was so here, this is speculative, but it fits with the Thailand kids incident and fits with all the other things that we looked into. Yeah. That, of course, there were a lot of detractors and non-fans of Elon that were attacking him, saying probably things that you were saying, or just like, you're not that good at game. Like, shut up, you probably paid someone or whatever. Okay. And because he is coming from all that trauma of being bullied, and he is still operating from that younger space, trying to get approval and trying to get safety, he can't let it go. I mean, none of us can. I'm 54. I was not traumatized at all growing up, and when people attack me online, it hurts. And I haven't always had the best mature reaction to it. But I think, is particular, and he is particular in that he gets a lot of hate. And so he also gets a lot of love, but he also gets a lot of hate, and he seemingly pays attention to the hate. He doesn't block people necessarily in a way that other people might. Anyway, so I could see him saying, I'll show them.
Right.
And he pays, because this is how it works in Path of Exile, that you pay someone who has been grinding and this is no joke, literally only sleeping 10 or 20 hours a week or something. Yeah. And they've been grinding for the past 2 months after this patch comes out, and they have a top 10 account. Their characters in top 10. And this is, as you were saying, much harder to do than Diablo.
Right.
And it's a hard game. It's not super hard, but it's more complicated than Diablo. Anyway.
Yeah, like the ladder system is way more complex. The options, the keyboard things, the strings of actions.
You say ladder system, it's more like an elaborate it's an elaborate spider web of progression. And when I play, and others as well, you might spend 70% of your time just staring at those skills, because everything you do on that skill tree impacts later in the game. Anyway, so for him, he starts the live stream and he's playing this, elite character, and with all these powers and all these weapons and magic stuff. Yeah. And anyone who knows this game, and maybe even people who don't know the game, can clearly tell that Elon does not know what the fuck he's doing when he's playing this game.
Yeah, and this is evident because, you and I don't run in those elite circles, but I know some gamers that are, like, I consider myself an avid gamer, but I've never been, like, top-tier gamer. But I know some people that are really good at games who are still not top-tier gamers, right? But those people that are really good at games, like one of the guys, my friend Jeremy, when new Diablo things come out, he is one of the people always grinding to get the new things right away. He knows all the tricks. He's looked up all online, so he can guide you in an instant through everything. Still, it's obvious when you watch him play, and he's not top tier, meaning he's not world known or any of that. But he is so quick at everything, and you're still like, wait, what did you just do? And he just knows all the shortcuts. He knows all the things. He knows which path. And then you're asking like, wait, why are we going to that town? Oh no, it's because we're going to go to that. And he just knows everything.
Yeah, and in order to get to that upper level, you have to have a lot of shortcuts that you use and functions of the game, so that you don't have to spend time going through all these different options. And so Elon Musk, when he's playing, to me as a Path of Exile player, and I'm not very good at all, but I don't know how many hours, probably a couple 300 hours or something over the past 10 years or something. I can tell there's a possibility he had never played the game
that session
because he's clicking around and he doesn't understand the basic functions of some of the actions, or he was given a tutorial for an hour beforehand or something.
Yeah.
And anyone who understands this knows that there's no way that's his character, and you can buy those characters.
Yeah.
And so it's clear he did buy that character. And again, if he came out and said, well, yeah, I did buy the character, but I am kind of good at this game. Like,
it's just such an unforced error, right?
Right.
And it just reveals a lot.
Right. Insecurity.
Yeah. Because imagine what I was just talking, maybe to you or my brother or something. Imagine if that same day for that live stream, he comes out and is like, all right, check it out. One of the perks of being the world's biggest billionaire, wink, wink, is I just bought myself a top tier character. Sorry, y'all, you can't have it.
Or a more realistic thing would be to have a real bitchin' character that's maybe ranked 500 or something, and it's still like a really bitch. But
fine, but I'm saying even with the purchase and everything, you know that his people will eat that up, right? Because he's bragging about how much money he's got, all these things.
Plus, like who cares?
Amazing.
It's the exact same thing when Donald Trump said, as a mistake, which is fine, that the hurricane was going to end up in, I believe, Alabama or something.
And then he had to redraw the world.
And then people were making fun of him on Twitter saying, no, the hurricane isn't going to end up in Alabama. It's just going to go through Florida and Georgia or something. And instead of him just ignoring which no one would have faulted him for, it's like he was talking off the top of his head, and he thought it was going to go into this other state. Or he could have just said, oh yeah, my bad. I thought it was Mississippi, but I was wrong. It's actually, people do that all the time. Yeah. No one would think he was an idiot. Instead, he draws a Sharpie on the official map, which some claim is actually a federal crime.
Oh my God.
Because technically you can't alter and mess with federal weather data.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like making up,
especially presenting it in public in a broadcast that's on a light. Yeah.
But it's so cringe because it's so clearly, and he points at, he's like, I was right. It does. And it's a fucking, and the path of the hurricane, there's an official pathway. And then there's this real
Sharpie.
Janky Sharpie that extends it into the state that he said. And
it's walking into jail.
As a viewer, you're watching this, you're like, my God, you are so insecure.
Yeah.
And you're so childish and so insecure that you're willing to swing for the fences on something that is insignificant. And if you're that insecure and that scared and that immature, then Nazi salutes are nothing to you.
Yeah, and so this is what I was heading at, is that gaming thing shows us that Musk, even though he is purportedly so smart and all these things, he steps in his own way a lot, right? Just like Trump. This is one of those cases because I really do believe that in his heart of hearts, he holds some large percentage of Aryan master race ideology, and the Vikings will rule Mars and all these things, right? I do believe that. And I believe that he wants that future of a technocratic, blah, blah. But he's like, oh, and I'll show the like all this other thing. He didn't need to do the salute to still have all the power and all the things and all the stuff. So he does it, and now the whole world's asking like, wait, what was that? And in his mind, it's like, well, that's right. I own them, or I show them, or now they're talking about that. But in reality, he got in his own way. Now, I'm not meaning to help the guy. I certainly don't want evil to win here. But I'm just saying it's fascinating that he can't even keep his trauma in check to win at his own game.
Yes. So the question is like, well, he's still massively in power, and Tesla stock is still extremely high, and all this, and he still has all his SpaceX contracts. So this is all just raising his profile, even raising the stock price of Twitter, because when there's controversy, then people go to Twitter, and so you can sell more ads, and it's possible, I suppose. But I think it's more likely that if he hadn't done all these things, he would be even richer and his stock prices would be even higher and his future would be even more assured. There's a possibility, because the market for cars, there's a delay, right? So a lot of people had, for example, and the Cybertruck is a prime example. When the Cybertruck was taking orders, the Elon Musk hate was at a certain level, and also the image of Elon Musk was very different back then. So you could be a card-carrying liberal and conceivably be very enthusiastic about pre-ordering your Cybertruck, but it took a while for them to come out, and so same with Tesla. And you know, and I know that in at least liberal circles, Seattle circles, Cybertrucks in particular, but even just Tesla itself, SpaceX maybe by extension, it's tainted now.
Yeah, now it gives us repulsion. It makes us ill.
Yeah, and so are we going to buy it? So in 5 years from now, when half of the country might not prefer your brand, but might even be disgusted to the point where centrists or even Republicans might not want that kind of heat from their neighbors and friends. Where is Tesla going to be?
Exactly. I mean, think of how much harder it would be if the Musk we thought we wanted and deserved, right? The Tony Stark. If that image kept going, so that right now, even maybe some of us would start questioning, wait, but now he's on stage supporting Trump. But a lot of the narrative would be, listen, he's trying to work from the inside. He wants to save the planet from global warming. And imagine he hadn't deviated from that. He hadn't done all the Nazi posts. He hadn't done if he was like truly this master plan, even if inside of his brain, ultimately the mask will be revealed in 500 years in Mars, right now he's staying. Like a lot of us would actually be like, Musk is still awesome. We say, no, right now, like you said, half of us at least, maybe, I don't know, some large percentage are going, no, that guy is not good. We're disgusted by his brand.
So I didn't show this, but an interviewer, a journalist, went on this to a MAGA rally or to the inauguration or something. Yeah. And interviewed MAGA people on the street, people wearing MAGA hats and other kinds of paraphernalia, and showed them the Nazi salute that Elon Musk was doing and asked them what they thought. And there was a variety of reactions, and there were people that were like, I'm sure that's being misunderstood, or what are you, some sort of liberal asking me this question? But it wasn't too bad. There wasn't a lot of people going, I support that, Right. It was just a lot of discomfort and also excuses being made. But there were some full-on MAGA people that would say, yeah, that doesn't look good, and that's not what we stand for. And if he's a Nazi or he's supporting Nazis, that's not okay. That's not what Make America Great Again stands for. That's not what the Republican Party stands for. It's not what Trump stands for. Just think about that you would have, because, in the past, most Republicans secretly or not so secretly hated Trump and everything that he stood for. So imagine that you have, full-on Trump supporters that are looking at Elon and going like, well, geez, that's going too far.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I am, I guess, hopeful that he gets in his own way in these ways. Same with Trump, honestly. Like, I have this hope of self-destruction. I will say, I've been rewatching Sopranos, and I'm right now, spoiler alert, I'm in the part in season 4 where he just, spoiler alert, you're about to listen to some stuff, where he just killed Ralph. And it's the same thing. Arguably, that moment is the beginning of the downfall. The rest of the stuff plays out from there because New York starts questioning. He made a lot of money for them. The rest of the capos start being like, what's going on? Paulie really now starts kind of like, it all starts kind of going. But in that moment, Tony, in spite of knowing better.
Yeah, that's funny. I wonder if, sorry to interrupt you, if Chase actually knew that in advance, because we know that the series started, or the show started, with him and those ducks. Mm-hmm. And it's perhaps the one thread of pure humanity that he has.
Yeah.
that Tony
horse.
Soprano has, and the reason why he kills Ralphie is because Ralphie killed the horse, or he suspects that Ralphie killed the horse. Does Ralphie full on admit it in the middle?
No, in fact, I'm sure there's someone that's analyzed the whole thing. He vehemently, ragefully denies it.
Right. So
to Tony's face.
for those who don't remember or haven't watched The Sopranos, they both own a racehorse together, and Tony really loves this racehorse just as a beautiful and as another creature, a sentient being,
Yeah.
And Ralphie is a bastard, and the stable burns down, and the horse is killed. But there's an insurance claim, and they both make a lot of money off of it. Ralphie is callous about it, like, well, at least we got insurance money, whatever, moving on. And Tony is pretty upset and starts to suspect that Ralphie might have caused the fire to kill the horse so he could take the insurance, because the horse was, I think, not winning races anymore.
He was costing more than he was going to be making.
Right. And Tony is upset and impulsively, to some extent, kills Ralphie, which is not what you're supposed to do to a made man.
And he had just lectured Paulie, gotten in his face, because Paulie had, quote, legitimate beef with Ralph, because Ralph had insulted his mom and made her, nearly psychotic and stuff. So Paulie wanted to kill Ralph. And Tony was like, you don't, because the rules and blah, blah, blah. And then Tony goes and kills Ralph.
And the scene is very visceral. The fight that eventually results in Tony Soprano overpowering Ralphie and killing him. It's a masterclass in cinematography and acting and directing what looks to be like the way fights really look like, and how, I don't know how you describe it, how animalistic they are, and how out of control Tony Soprano is, and just how emotional it is, and how tiring, it looks like they're both getting a little tired halfway through.
Yeah, Tony is a mess for like a couple days after. Now, and I don't mean emotionally, let alone, but I mean like physically a mess.
Yeah, and then they have to dispose of the body and stuff.
And so, but my point of bringing that up is that here's an example of someone who has got deep trauma as well, but otherwise has this master plan. He's been reading Sun Tzu. He's like, I'm going to empower my nephew. I'm going to do all these things. He's generally really good at scheming and plotting. He always sees the angles. He is really good. That's one of his super abilities. He can't control his trauma.
Yeah.
And because of that, he screws up his whole operation. Yeah. He doesn't know it in the moment, but at the very least, right off the bat, he killed his top earner. And he's going to foment a fear, doubt, and uncertainty among his whole crew, and it's going to lead. But it's the same kind of like, I cannot stop getting in my own way that we're seeing.
Right. So what's the final word, Berto? Is Elon a Nazi?
I really believe, based on all the stuff we've seen, I really believe that in his heart of hearts, he holds Nazi ideology. And I don't mean the superficial, like, we need to eliminate Jews from Europe. I just mean the deeper, grandiose vision of the true master Aryan race becoming the future. And in his mind, it's a hybrid future with computers, and it becomes this master race across the universe. I really believe that. I also believe that he holds somewhat more like mundane notions about it related to, whites need to have more kids and blah, blah, blah. But and lastly, I also believe that there's some contradictions with his ideology, because he also needs to have the power to do all his visions and shit like that. So he'll compromise as he needs to and say like, well, I need people from India. And,
right. I mean, one way to look at it is that he's both not a Nazi and a Nazi, or he's not really a part of any organization. There's a possibility he's not really trying to adhere to any ideology or any kind of group, that he probably thinks of himself as thinking independently. It's just that when he looks at a lot of rhetoric and a lot of actions that different groups or individuals are taking, it just so happens that a lot of the neo-Nazi rhetoric is in line with the way that he thinks. So you could say that he's not a neo-Nazi, but as you're saying, he adheres to ideas that are within the neo-Nazi camp,
It's like, why would Steve Bannon, someone we do not hold in esteem, someone who absolutely has nationalist and supremacist views, why would he label Musk as an evil person who is deeply racist?
Yeah.
It gives one pause. It could just be him steering, trying to influence public view, maybe. But when the videos I've seen of him talking about it, there seems to be a deeper thing there. And again, I'm not saying like one good, the other one bad. They're both bad. It's really interesting that even someone like that sees Musk in this darker, more evil light.
Yeah, he could also just be butthurt.
He could be.
That Trump,
Absolutely.
That Trump,
Yeah.
The other question, the final question I want to ask you, Berto, is what was going through Elon Musk's mind as he was doing the gesture?
That's where I think that on the surface, just like with the video games and everything else, I think that on the surface there was something, again, more mundane going on. I've heard the theories, and I would actually put good money on that. He came up with this idea as sort of a troll move. He told one or some of his closest people, like, watch what I'm going to do. He might have even said, what would you say? How much would you bet me that I could do a Sig Heil on stage? It's like, no, come on. How much? I could totally imagine that. But definitely with those layers underneath of what that really means, because he's not an idiot. Even though he isn't the next Einstein, he is also not an idiot. And so I think the sequence goes, I'm going to go on the stage. He really means he's excited. In his mind, he is actually, this is the manifestation of that vision he's got. He think of that, how much power he's gained in that moment, right? His vision is coming true. And he's like, watch this world, watch this bullies, boom, bam, right? And then the ultimate FU to the world is, and I'm going to get away with it.
So do you think he was trying to signal to everyone or to other neo-Nazis or something support for neo-Nazis, or was he just giving a middle finger to the liberals?
I think that in his top level voice, he was just doing a meme. But I think in his not even that much deeper, but maybe second tier voice, he's like, but this is my tribe. So I do think that there was there.
He might be signaling to neo-Nazis, but also to people that don't really care about flirting with the Nazi salute, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that you wouldn't necessarily know because they're not going to tweet about this.
Right.
That are like, well, it's just the Nazis. I mean, the Nazis weren't that bad. Like, let's calm down. They're not going to do a Nazi salute. They don't consider themselves to be neo-Nazis, but they're like, what's the big deal? Hitler had some good things to say, actually.
Right.
You could imagine that he thinks he's signaling to those people as well, right?
And and you have the Nick Fuentes of the world coming out and saying, yeah, that's full on the salute.
Right.
That is full on. And with a big smile, because he knows what that means. It means his worldview is becoming validated at the highest level.
Right. And I just want to, the biggest data point is that Elon Musk, at no point, as you know, we're recording this January 24, we should mention that because who knows what will happen after this. At no point has Elon Musk said, oh my God, that does look like the Nazi salute. That's awful. I do not support anything that the neo-Nazis or that the Nazis hold. I am mortified that I did that. I was nervous. I was giddy. I was excited. And I was honestly trying to do My Heart Goes Out to You. And boy, I should have done that in the mirror before I went on stage. It's so embarrassing. He hasn't said anything close to that. Mm-mm. And you would still wonder, right? Because he might just be saying that and winking, right? He has not said that. He hasn't said anything close to that. He's just saying to all the liberals, like, I actually didn't read the other tweet that he tweeted. On
the anniversary of the Auschwitz liberation, he made a joke with tons of Nazi puns in it.
Right. I mean, whether or not he knew it was the anniversary, but he tweeted a bunch of puns, if you will, and it was, don't say Hess to Nazi accusations. So Hess is one of the Nazis, but I don't even get the pun.
It's don't say yes to.
Oh. Yeah. And then some people will Goebbels anything down.
And he doesn't maybe know that it's pronounced Goebbels, so it's like gobble everything.
Well, but you know.
Yeah, it's fine.
So that's as close as Hess to yes. Sure. So some people will gobble anything. Some people will Goebbels. Stop goring your enemies. Stop goading. Goring?
Goring, like a bull gores someone.
His pronouns would have been he, Himmler. Okay, that's the one that actually makes sense as a pun. Bet you didn't not see that coming. Yeah. Bet you did it. Bet you did not see that coming. And that pun makes sense too. So I just want to contrast again. So if we scale it way back in terms of what I said, he could easily say, "Oh my God, embarrassing! What a gaffe! Sorry about that." Or even scale it back. "Oh my God, I was awkward on stage." That's all you would have to say. Just, "Oh my God, I was awkward on stage." But what a day, you know? Like with the Thailand kids incident, he would have tweets that were kind of along those lines.
At first, yeah.
Yeah, he was just like, "Oh, well, you know, you're right. And, you know, I'm letting the divers, I'm just trying to," you know, he was seemingly understanding what people were criticizing him for and kind of responding to it. He could really say a minimal thing, but he has only to date said, "Frankly, they need better dirty tricks. The everyone is Hitler attack is so tired."
Yeah.
Which I find to be a very tired retort, because that's a tired thing that people will say. Everything's about Hitler. And it's like, yeah, that it is tired that everyone is Hitler, but it was the Nazi salute, you fucking asshole. It's not like someone calling a politician Hitler because they're anti-immigration, you know what I mean? Or they want to bolster the border. That, you know, that is tired. But when you're doing the Nazi salute and they're not calling you Hitler, they're saying that's the Nazi salute. That Hitler isn't being talked about.
At least what Rogan was saying, which of course I don't agree with, but at least what he was saying was, look, don't do that. He was basically saying, don't do that motion.
Yeah.
I know what you were trying to do. Don't do that motion. Right.
He was calling it a gaffe.
A gaffe, yeah. Now, I don't agree with that take, but still, Rogan was not saying one of two things. Certainly, he wasn't saying, "So what? Nazi salute is fine," of course. And also, he wasn't saying, like, "Oh, everyone's so sensitive." Maybe he said it later, maybe. But he was at the very least calling it a gaffe.
Yeah,
like,
meaning,
don't do that.
It's understandable that people are reacting against this.
Exactly. Because don't do that. Just don't do that, right? We're not even there. He's like, everyone is so tired. Everyone calls Hitler. Here's some puns. I'm just going to make fun of you. I have zero empathy to your position, and I'm going to make fun of you.
Yeah. So, yikes, Berto.
Yeah.
Big time yikes.
Yeah.
And that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please, my heart goes out to you, and take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself because you deserve it.